Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Morning Devotional brought to you by Golden Isles Primitive Baptist Fellowship and Heart Floss TV. This morning I have a lesson for you entitled Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? But first we have a song that fits our theme this morning. Brenda's going to sing Oh Happy Day. Oh, happy day. Well, that's something that our friend Lazarus knew something about, although for a brief time. Guess who's coming to dinner? Well, we're going to look first of all at a supper that was held in Bethany, and we read about that in the 12th chapter of John, verses 1 and 2. Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table. So the location then was in Bethany, and the time was 6 days before Passover. That means that we're less than a week before Jesus will be nailed to the cross. And so the gathering there in Bethany had a significant meaning beyond just an ordinary supper. Now, who is there? Well, we know that Jesus is there, Martha's there, Mary's there, and we read of Judas Iscariot being there. But when it comes to Lazarus, it says, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. But Lazarus. Now that sounds kind of strange, doesn't it? As it's used here, but is used as an expression of surprise, like, but that's fantastic. Why should Lazarus' appearance surprise anyone, those especially who were there at the supper in Bethany? Well, we'll need to flash back for a few weeks and see why we read at the supper in Bethany, but Lazarus was there. So we'll turn back then to John the 11th chapter, and here we find that Jesus received news that his friend Lazarus was ill. Beginning at verse 1 of chapter 11 of John, now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary, and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, that is, unto Jesus, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. So there Jesus receives the news. He's up in the northern area near Galilee when he receives this news that his friend Lazarus is sick. So what do Jesus and the disciples do? Well, when he heard that he was sick, in verse 6, when he heard therefore that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Now later on, people are going to wonder, well, why didn't he come on immediately to Bethany when he heard the news? But we'll see why as we go along. So he abode there where he was for 2 days. And then at the appropriate time, he tells his disciples, we're going to go back to Judea. Verse 7 reads, and after that saith he to his disciples, let's go into Judea again. Now the disciples didn't care much for that idea because already the presence of Jesus was stirring up the authorities like a hornet's nest in Jerusalem particularly, and the disciples knew it would probably be of great harm to their friend Jesus if he went back to Jerusalem. But he's going nonetheless, and so we read that they traveled back to Judea, and he was first met there in the little town of Bethany, which is about 2 miles northeast of Jerusalem. That's where they were when they had the supper. And now many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning his brother. Now why would they do that? Because Lazarus was dead. Jesus told the disciples in verse 14, Jesus said unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. He wanted them to know that without any doubt. So Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary stayed still or sat still in the house. And then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. And of course then Jesus goes on and makes that great statement about being the life and the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. So that was Martha greeting Jesus. And now we come to Mary. In verse 32 of John 11, then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And then here's Jesus' reaction to that. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Now there's two times on this occasion when Jesus groaned. The other time, in verse 38, Jesus therefore again, groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. Now, what would cause this groaning? And by the way, let me just tell you from the Greek dictionary what this word groan means on this occasion. The word literally comes from a Greek word meaning to snort like a horse, to be enraged, or to be greatly angry. The United Bible Society's handbook, which is completely reliable, said concerning the groaning used here, Jesus was angry, perhaps at the lack of faith or at the presence of evil, that is, death. It is impossible to conclude that anything less than anger is meant in these two verses. So both of the instances where Jesus groaned was in response to something that someone said or someone did. When Mary said, Lord, if you would have been here, if you'd been here, my brother had not died. And then they were shedding these wailing tears because of that. And we read that Jesus groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And the other time Jesus groaned was in response to the people around the scene there that said, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused even this man to not have died? And then Jesus groaned again. There was this indignation at this lack of belief on this occasion. So then Jesus approaches the grave, and this is what we read. He asked, where have you laid him? In verse 34. They said unto him, Lord, come and see. And then verse 35 is the shortest verse in all the Bible. It says simply, Jesus wept. Now that word wept here, unlike the wailing that we read of before, the word wept as it applies to Jesus here comes from a noun meaning simply tears. It's like when you're so moved your eyes well up. The other time that Jesus wept, it was the time that he approached Jerusalem, and he knew about the destruction that would be coming in 70 AD. And we read in Luke 19:41, and when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, knowing the terrible thing that was going to happen. And he says, if you had known, even thou at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. So Jesus wept on that occasion regarding something that was going to happen to Jerusalem. And on this occasion that we're reading about here in John chapter 11, Jesus is still weeping, or he wept about something that is going to happen. And he's disturbed by what he knows will come to pass shortly. So what is it that made Jesus weep? The tears were certainly not because Lazarus had been sick. We've already seen Jesus' reaction to that. The tears were not because Lazarus had died. After all, it is God who proclaimed, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. And it's certainly not a reaction to the wailing and the misconceptions that were abundant around this grave of Lazarus. No, he groaned over these. And it's not because Lazarus laid in the grave, because Jesus had just told Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. So what is about to happen here that brings tears to Jesus' eyes? Well, now we come to Lazarus' return. Verse 39 of John 11. Jesus said, Take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead for 4 days. There is no doubt that Lazarus was dead, that the body in that grave was dead and had begun to decay. Jesus said unto her, Said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? And of course, this was that which was about to happen there, the miracle, the last miracle that's recorded regarding Jesus that would be for the glory of God. And what was that miracle? Well, it was going to be so that Lazarus would live again. And so Jesus said in verse 43, when he thus had spoken, that is, he had spoken to his Father, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes. Now let me read to you from the great Scottish preacher and theologian from the 19th century, Alexander White. He said, Not till we have our eyes opened to the ascended Lazarus, that is, Lazarus in glory, will we ever read this chapter aright, or understand why in all the world Jesus should weep standing before the place where Lazarus' dead body lay. Jesus knew that all of this, the raising, the resurrection of Lazarus, was for the glory of God and to instill belief in the people that were there on that scene. But he also knew about the great cost to his friend Lazarus. And so Jesus wept. Jesus' friend Lazarus was now called upon to trade the white robe that he donned in glory for the grave clothes which he wore as he came forth from the grave. His friend Lazarus would leave the peaceful environs of glory and be thrown into the turmoil in this world below. We even read in the 12th chapter, verse 10 of John, that the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus to death also. Jesus' friend Lazarus was pulled from the company of the saints in glory to a supper in Bethany where he wasn't much more than a curiosity. And so Jesus wept. Chrysostom, the 6th century archbishop of Constantinople, wrote, When our Lord was told of Lazarus' death, he was glad. But when he came to raise him to life, he wept. For though his disciples gained by it, and though Martha and Mary gained by it, yet Lazarus himself lost by it, being once again imprisoned in the body of flesh. One of the sweetest and at the same time saddest chapters in literature is found in Charles Dickens' The Old Curiosity Shop. Here the frail old schoolmaster stands over the lifeless body of little Nell, and he tells those around him, Think what it is compared with the world to which her young spirit has winged its early flight, and say, if one deliberate wish expressed in solemn terms above this bed, could call her back to life, which of us would utter it? Yet that is what Jesus, for the glory of God, and for the faith of all those that witnessed this event, must now do for Lazarus. He said, "Lazarus, come forth." With those words, Lazarus' soul descended back into the grave to inhabit the body that had lain dead for 4 days. He that was dead came forth. Now let's make a practical application to this. We'll never be called upon to give up as much as Lazarus did when he left glory to come back to this earth. But all God's people are often called upon to make self-sacrifices for God's glory. Jesus said, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." We may be asked to trade our personal use of time for service, for worship, for helping others, for giving ourselves to prayer and study and meditation on the things of God and His Word. We may be asked to leave off using our talents and skills solely for our own use and serve Christ in His kingdom and His church. I often think about two great voices that came out of Phoenix, where I grew up. One of the voices I heard when she was a little girl in the old 7th Avenue Church of God. Her name was Sandra Faye Patty, and she began singing when she was only 3 or 4 years old. The other voice was that of Wayne Newton, and we would hear him sing every Saturday morning at the Old Fox Theater. But one of those voices went on to glorify God in His kingdom, and the other voice went on to be well known on the Las Vegas Strip. So you see, often we're called upon to use our talent and our skill for God's glory and not so much for our own. But whenever or to whatever duty Christ calls us to, lest we think too much is being required of us, let us remember our brother Lazarus, who gave up more than us all. And now may God be with you till we meet again.